The pen trembled between Avery Callahan's fingers as she stared at the final line, waiting for her name. The courthouse hallway felt colder than winter, even though it was late spring. Her chest tightened as if the air itself refused to let her breathe. One signature, just one, and everything would change forever. The paper looked ordinary, white, clean, legal, but to Avery, it felt like a goodbye letter she never wanted to write. Her lawyer stood beside her, silent and tired. The judge had already nodded once, the kind of nod that meant the decision had been made long before today. The custody papers were ready. The court had ruled that her daughter would live with her father until Avery could prove financial stability. It was not about love. It was never about love. It was about money she did not have. Her ex-husband had walked away 3 years ago when hospital bills piled up and rent rose again. He had chosen distance over struggle. Avery had chosen to stay, even when staying hurt. She worked double shifts at a small grocery store, skipped meals so her daughter could eat better, and told bedtime stories with a smile she forced into place. But love did not count on paper. Income did. She signed. The scratch of ink on paper sounded louder than the voices around her. The clerk slid the documents across the table. The judge gave a short nod. It is done. No one clapped. No one cried. The world simply moved forward as if a mother's heart had not just cracked open. Families filled the hallway outside the courtroom. Some were smiling, some arguing softly, but they all had children holding their hands. Avery stepped out slowly. Laughter echoed from somewhere near the stairs. It cut through her like glass. She kept her eyes down. If she looked at them, she might fall apart. She could still remember the way her daughter hugged her that morning, whispering, "It's okay, Mommy. I'll be brave." Children should not have to be brave for their parents. Children should not be the ones holding everything together. Yet her little girl had become her emotional gatekeeper, wiping Avery's tears with small hands, telling her, "We'll fix it." Now Avery wondered who would wipe her daughter's tears at night. She felt the weight of public humiliation pressing on her shoulders. A few people glanced at her, recognizing the look. The empty-handed parent. The one who lost. She imagined the whispers. She must have done something wrong. They did not know she lost because she could not afford a bigger apartment. They did not know she had chosen food over a lawyer many nights. Avery adjusted the thin strap of her purse and walked toward the exit. Every step felt heavy. Around her, other parents gathered their kids close, guiding them toward the parking lot. A father lifted his son onto his shoulders. A mother wiped chocolate from her toddler's cheek. Life continued, full and loud. She kept her gaze fixed on the tiled floor. That was when she noticed them. Across the hall, near a wooden bench by the vending machines, sat a man with tired eyes and 3 identical little girls surrounding him. Triplets, maybe 5 years old. Their small backpacks rested at their feet. The man held a folder in one hand and a juice box in the other. He looked overwhelmed, like someone who had not slept well in years. Hudson Reed did not look rich. His jacket was simple, sleeves slightly worn, but the way he leaned toward his daughters, listening carefully as one of them whispered something, showed a quiet kind of strength. He nodded gently, brushing hair away from her face. The girls watched everything around them with wide, curious eyes. Avery quickly looked away. She did not want to meet anyone's gaze, especially not children's. Children had a way of seeing too much. She passed them, focusing on the exit sign glowing red above the glass doors. Just a few more steps and she would be outside, alone. Officially and completely alone. Behind her, she heard a soft voice. "Daddy, why is that lady crying?" Avery's steps faltered, but she did not turn. She did not want pity from strangers, especially from a child. She pushed the courthouse door open. The sky outside was gray, and rain had started to fall in thin, quiet lines. It matched the silence growing inside her. She stepped onto the wet pavement. The cool rain touched her face, mixing with tears she no longer tried to hide. For a moment she stood there, letting the rain soak into her hair, her jacket, her skin. The world felt empty, like a house after everyone moves out. Inside the courthouse, Hudson glanced toward the door. He had heard his daughter's question. He had seen the way Avery walked, shoulders curved inward like she was carrying something invisible and heavy. He recognized that look. He had worn it himself the day his wife left, unable to handle the pressure of 3 babies and hospital debt. He had stayed. He had learned to braid hair, to pack 3 lunches at once, to calm 3 nightmares in the same night. Loneliness had become familiar to him. But so had staying. One of the triplets slipped her hand into his. "She looks sad," she whispered. Hudson hesitated. He did not know her story. He only knew that sometimes people needed someone to notice them. Outside, Avery took another step forward into the rain, ready to disappear into the gray afternoon. And then she heard it. 3 small voices, clear and bright despite the storm. "Wait!" She froze, her hand still on the courthouse door, her heart suddenly pounding louder than the rain. 3 tiny footsteps rushed closer behind her, and Avery slowly began to turn. Bennett, Callum, and Rowan Reed stood just inside the courthouse doors, watching the woman in the rain as if she were the only person in the world. Adults had walked past her without stopping. Shoes clicked across the marble floor. Car engines started outside. Conversations continued. But the 3 5-year-olds did not move. Their small faces were pressed close to the glass, their eyes wide and serious. Hudson Reed noticed it instantly. His daughters always felt things deeply. He followed their gaze and saw her, the woman who had just stepped into the rain like she had nowhere else to go. Her shoulders were curved inward, her hands still resting on the door as if she needed support just to stand. Hudson adjusted the strap of his worn leather bag and sighed softly. He had come to the courthouse for a property issue related to his late wife's small bakery space. Papers, signatures, technical problems that required patience. He had not come for anything emotional, but life rarely asks permission before placing pain in front of you. "Daddy," Bennett whispered, her voice gentle and careful, "that lady looks like she lost something." Hudson knelt slightly to meet her eyes. Bennett was the empathetic one. She noticed sadness the way other children noticed candy. She felt it quickly and deeply. Callum tilted her head, studying Avery with a serious expression. "No one is standing with her," she said logically. "Everyone else has someone." Callum always searched for patterns. She liked answers. She liked the reasons. Rowan, the boldest of the 3, pressed her palm against the glass. "She looks left behind," she said simply. Hudson swallowed. Children saw what adults learned to ignore. They did not measure pain by status, clothes, or confidence. They saw it in posture, in silence, in the way someone breathed. Outside, Avery had not moved much. The rain was growing heavier, darkening her jacket. Hudson could tell she was crying even from a distance. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet kind of crying that happens when someone feels truly alone. He remembered that feeling. 2 years ago, after his wife passed away from a sudden illness, he had stood in a hospital parking lot holding 3 car seats and wondering how he would survive the next day. Friends had helped at first. My family had visited. But over time, people returned to their own lives. He stayed. He learned to wake up before sunrise to pack 3 lunches. He learned to sit through 3 different tantrums without losing patience. He learned to braid hair after watching online videos late at night. He was stable now. The girls were healthy. The bills were paid, even if just barely. But loneliness had become a quiet roommate in his house. There was no one to share small victories with. No one to laugh with after bedtime. Stability did not remove loneliness. Inside the courthouse, the triplets continued watching Avery like she was a story they needed to understand. "Maybe she forgot her umbrella," Callum suggested. "No," Bennett said softly. "She forgot her smile." Rowan frowned. Why didn't anyone stay with her? That question hung in the air. Hudson placed a gentle hand on Rowan's shoulder. "Sometimes grown-ups have hard days," he said calmly. "We don't stare. We give them space." But even as he said it, he knew space was not always what someone needed. Sometimes people needed to be chosen. Avery finally began to walk toward the sidewalk, her steps slow and uncertain. She did not look back at the building. She did not look at anyone. It was as if she was trying to make herself invisible. Bennett's lower lip trembled. "She's going to walk away alone," she whispered. Hudson stood up straight. He had to guide his daughters toward the parking lot. It was not their place to interfere in a stranger's private pain. He took Callum's hand first, then Bennett's. Rowan resisted slightly. "Daddy," Rowan said, her voice firm in a way that surprised him. "When Mommy felt sad, you stayed with her." Hudson felt his chest tighten. His daughters remembered more than he realized. They remembered nights when their mother had cried from exhaustion, and Hudson had sat beside her without saying much, just staying. Yes, he answered quietly. I stayed. Then why is everyone leaving her? Rowan asked. There was no easy answer. Hudson gently began leading them toward the parking lot doors on the side of the building. We don't know her story, he said softly, but we can hope someone will show her kindness. Kindness. Not money. Not power. Just kindness. Through the glass, Avery paused near the curb. A car passed by, splashing water near her shoes. She did not react. She simply stood there, as if waiting for something she did not expect to come. Callum glanced back one more time. She's still there, she said. Bennett squeezed Hudson's hand. Daddy, can people choose someone even if they're not family? Sometimes, he replied carefully. Family is about who stays. The words stayed settled deep inside him. He pushed the side door open, guiding the girls toward the parking lot. The world felt gray and quiet. He could sense Rowan slowing behind him. He turned slightly. Rowan. But Rowan had already slipped her small hand free from his grasp. Her bright yellow rain boots splashed against the wet pavement as she changed direction. Hudson's heart skipped. Rowan was not looking at the parking lot anymore. She was walking straight toward Avery. Before Hudson could call her name again, Rowan stopped just inches away from the crying woman and reached up to tug gently at her sleeve. Did someone leave you behind? Rowan's voice was soft, almost curious, but it stopped Avery in her tracks more powerfully than the judge's final words ever had. The rain continued to fall, tapping gently against the pavement, but for a moment Avery heard nothing except that question. She slowly turned around, her eyes red, her breath uneven. A small girl in bright yellow boots stood inches away from her, looking up without fear or judgment. Avery blinked in surprise. Of all the things she expected to hear outside that courthouse, this was not one of them. Rowan tilted her head slightly. You look like when my daddy feels sad, she added honestly, like someone walked away. The words were not dramatic. They were not loud, but they landed deep inside Avery's chest, deeper than the legal language, deeper than the sound of her pen signing her daughter's future away. Behind Rowan, Hudson hurried forward, his expression apologetic. I am so sorry, he said quickly, reaching for Rowan's shoulder. She doesn't mean to be rude. But Rowan gently pulled her shoulder back. I'm not being rude, she insisted. I'm asking. Bennett and Callum had joined them now, standing close to their father but watching Avery carefully. Bennett's eyes were soft with concern. Callum was thoughtful, trying to understand the situation like a puzzle. Avery swallowed. She had faced lawyers, paperwork, and judgment that morning. But standing in front of three children who simply wanted to understand her sadness felt harder. She forced a small smile. I'm okay, she said quietly. Just a long day. Callum studied her face. You don't look okay, she said gently. Your eyes are shiny. Girls, he said softly. We should give her space. But Bennett stepped forward slightly. Sometimes space makes people feel more alone, she said, almost whispering. Avery felt something inside her shift. These children were not asking about custody. They were not asking about money or mistakes. They were asking about being left behind, about loneliness, about staying. The theme of the day had been loss, but now something else was standing in front of her. Unexpected kindness, offered by children who owed her not. Hing. Hudson looked at Avery with quiet understanding. We didn't mean to intrude, he said more calmly. It's just, they notice things. I can see that, Avery replied softly. The rain began to slow, turning into a light mist. Rowan stepped even closer, her small hand still holding the edge of Avery's sleeve. My daddy says when people look like that, it means their heart feels heavy, she explained seriously. Is your heart heavy? Avery's throat tightened. No one had asked her that today. Not the judge, not her lawyer, not even her ex-husband. They had discussed schedules, finances, and conditions, but not her heart. Yes, she admitted quietly. It's a little heavy. He recognized that look, the moment when someone tries to stay strong but is running out of strength. After his wife passed away, people had told him to be brave, to focus on the kids, to move forward. Very few had asked how his heart felt. He hesitated. Should he step in more? Or would that make this moment uncomfortable? Society had rules about strangers and boundaries. Yet sometimes the heart ignored those rules. Rowan nodded seriously at Avery's answer. When my heart feels heavy, Daddy makes pancakes, she said, as if sharing important advice. Or he lets us sit close, Callum added, or we hold hands. Bennett looked directly at Avery. Do you have someone to hold your hand? The question broke something gentle and fragile inside her. She tried to brush it off with a small laugh, but the sound trembled. Not today, she whispered. Hudson stepped forward then, his voice calm and steady. Some days are harder than others, he said carefully. But they don't last forever. Avery looked at him for the first time properly. There was no pity in his eyes, no judgment, just quiet understanding. He did not look wealthy or powerful. His jacket was simple. His hands looked tired. But he stood firmly like someone who had learned how to stay even when life hurt. She wondered briefly what his story was. Hudson felt his own memories rising. After the funeral, people had visited for weeks. Meals were delivered. Calls were made. Then slowly, one by one, the visits stopped. Friends became busy. The family returned to distant cities. He had stayed because he had no choice. 3 small girls depended on him. Staying became his strength. Now here he was, watching another parent who looked like she had been left standing alone. Avery wiped her cheek quickly. Thank you, she said to the girls, for noticing. Rowan smiled proudly, as if she had solved something important. You shouldn't stand in the rain by yourself, she declared. Hudson gently placed a hand on Rowan's shoulder again. All right, he said softly. We should head home. The girls did not argue this time, but they kept looking at Avery as if they were memorizing her face. As Hudson turned to leave, Bennett paused for a second. She looked back at Avery, then up at her father. Daddy, she said thoughtfully, maybe some parents don't need to be perfect. Maybe they just need new kids to love them too. The words were simple, innocent, but they settled deep into Hudson's mind. He glanced once more at Avery standing in the soft rain, her expression stunned, her loneliness suddenly seen. He did not respond to Bennett right away, but that night, long after the girls were asleep, her words would echo louder than anything else. As Hudson buckled his daughters into the car, he looked back at the courthouse one last time and wondered if fate had just placed someone in their path for a reason. That night, in 2 different parts of the city, neither Avery nor Hudson could sleep. The world outside was quiet, but inside their homes, silence felt loud. Avery sat on the edge of her small living room, still wearing the same sweater from the courthouse. The apartment felt larger than usual, even though it was barely big enough for 2 people. Across the hallway, her daughter's bedroom door stood half open. She had not closed it. She could not. The room inside was neat and painfully still. A small stuffed rabbit lay on the pillow. A drawing of a sun and 2 stick figures, labeled Mommy and Me, was taped to the wall. Avery stepped inside slowly, as if entering a memory instead of a room. She sat on the tiny bed and pressed her palm against the blanket, trying to hold on to the warmth that was no longer there. The court had called it temporary custody, a step toward stability, a responsible decision. But the word temporary did not make the room feel less empty. Society liked to judge struggling mothers quietly. If a father worked long hours, he was responsible. If a mother struggled financially, she was careless. Avery had heard the whispers before. She had felt the stares. Today only made it official. She lay back on the small bed, staring at the ceiling painted with glow-in-the-dark stars. Her daughter used to count them before sleeping. Tonight, there was no counting, just silence. Across town, Hudson was not facing silence. He was facing noise. Daddy, I can't find my purple pajamas, Rowan called from the hallway. Callum took my blanket, Bennett shouted from the bedroom. Hudson moved from room to room, picking up toys, folding laundry, brushing teeth, answering questions. Bedtime in his house was never quiet. It was a small storm of energy and emotion. He tied one braid, then another. He read half a story before being asked for water. He kissed 3 foreheads in 3 different ways, because each girl liked something different. By the time the lights were off, his body felt heavy with exhaustion. Physical exhaustion was something he understood well. It was predictable. It came every night. But emotional exhaustion was different. It showed up when the house finally grew quiet. He walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, staring at the sink full of dishes. When his wife was alive, they used to stand there together after bedtime, talking about simple things. Now the kitchen light felt too bright, the room too wide. After she passed, people came often. Friends brought casseroles, neighbors offered help. But slowly, visits became rare. Messages became shorter. Everyone had their own lives to return to. Hudson never blamed them. He understood. Still, the house had grown quieter each year. He stayed because he had to. Because three small girls depended on him. Staying became his promise. A soft pair of footsteps padded into the kitchen. Bennett stood there, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "is the sad lady from the rain okay?" Hudson's heart tightened. He crouched down to her level. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Does she have anyone?" Bennett asked. The question lingered. "I hope so," he said gently. Back in her apartment, Avery sat at the kitchen table with an unpaid electricity bill in front of her. Numbers blurred as tears filled her eyes again. She had always believed love was enough. But tonight, love felt invisible. She wondered if her daughter thought she had failed. The thought hurt more than anything else. Her phone buzzed with a notification from social media, a picture of a smiling family at a birthday party. She turned the phone face down. Loneliness felt sharper when compared to other people's happiness. At the same time, Hudson sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the ceiling. He could not stop thinking about the woman in the rain, the way she had stood there as if waiting for permission to exist, the way she had thanked his daughters for noticing her pain. Was it random? Or was it something else? Callum's voice echoed from earlier in his mind. "She doesn't look okay." And Bennett's words followed. "Maybe some parents just need new kids to love them too." He had brushed it off at the courthouse. But now, in the quiet of the night, it felt different. Not about replacing anyone, not about fixing someone, but about connection, about choosing to see someone when others walk away. In her apartment, Avery stood and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement. She imagined her daughter brushing her teeth in another house, maybe asking about her. "Maybe I'm missing her." She placed her hand over her heart. It still felt heavy. But beneath the heaviness, there was something small and unexpected. The memory of three little girls who had cared enough to ask questions. The memory of a father who had looked at her without judgment. Loneliness was different in both homes that night. In Avery's apartment, it was emotional emptiness. In Hudson's house, it was quiet longing hidden beneath chaos. But both felt the same truth. They wanted to be chosen, not just needed. Hudson finally lay down, staring into the darkness. "Maybe it wasn't random," he whispered to himself. Avery closed her eyes and imagined hearing children's laughter again, not as something painful, but as something possible. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. But both of them fell asleep, thinking about the same rainy afternoon. The next morning, as Hudson held the cafe door open for his daughters before school, he froze when he saw who was standing inside. Avery almost walked out of the small neighborhood grocery store when she heard three excited voices call her name at once. She had only stepped inside to buy milk and bread before her evening shift. Her mind was still heavy, but she was learning how to carry the weight quietly. She kept her head due. One, as she moved through the aisles, comparing prices carefully, counting the few bills in her wallet twice. Stability felt far away, but she was trying. Trying was the only thing she had control over. She reached the checkout line and froze. "Rain lady!" Before she could react, three small figures came running toward her, their shoes squeaking lightly against the clean floor. Bennett reached her first, smiling wide. Callum followed with a serious but happy expression. Rowan came last, moving fast as always. Avery blinked in surprise. "Oh," she said softly, caught between shock and warmth. "Hi." Hudson appeared a few steps behind them, slightly out of breath but not upset. This time his expression held something different. Not embarrassment, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance of the moment. "I guess they remember you," he said gently. "They do," Bennett replied proudly, holding Avery's hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "We were hoping we'd see you again." Avery felt a small, unexpected smile rise to her face. She had planned to avoid crowded places for a while, afraid of running into reminders of what she had lost. Yet here, in the cereal aisle, she was being welcomed like someone important. Rowan looked up at her seriously. "Are you still heavy-hearted?" she asked. Hudson cleared his throat softly. "Rowan." "It's okay," Avery said quickly, kneeling slightly so she was at their level. I'm a little better today. And she meant it. Seeing them felt lighter than she expected. Callum studied the basket in Avery's hand. You're buying milk, she observed. That means you're staying somewhere. That's good. Avery laughed softly. Yes, I'm staying. Hudson watched the way she spoke to them. Gentle but steady, never talking down to them. There was something natural about it. Something practiced. You're good with kids, he said without thinking. Avery stood up slowly. I used to volunteer at my daughter's school, she admitted. Reading time, art projects, lunch duty sometimes. Her voice softened at the memory, but it did not break. I like being around kids. They're honest. Bennett nodded quickly. We're very honest. That's true, Hudson replied with a small smile. For a moment they stood there between shelves of cereal and canned soup, an unlikely group that felt strangely balanced. Other shoppers moved around them, but the space felt calm. Avery kept a gentle distance, careful not to step too close emotionally. She reminded herself that this was a coincidence, not a sign. She could not afford to build hope on random meetings. Still, when Rowan slipped her small hand into Avery's again, she did not pull away. Hudson noticed the way Avery listened carefully when Callum explained the difference between two types of cookies. He noticed how she bent down to fix Bennett's slightly crooked ponytail without even asking. The movement was automatic, caring, almost protective. You don't have to help, he said quietly. I don't mind, she answered. There was no awkwardness this time, no heavy rain, just fluorescent lights and the soft hum of refrigerators. Yet something deeper was happening. The girls had already decided she was safe. Children had a way of choosing without overthinking. At the checkout counter, Rowan insisted that Avery stand with them instead of in a separate line. It's faster together, she declared. Hudson hesitated, then nodded. If you don't mind. I don't, Avery replied. As the cashier scanned items, Bennett tugged on Avery's sleeve. Do you like soccer? She asked. I do, Avery said. I used to watch my daughter play in the park. We have practice on Saturday, Callum explained seriously. We are very organized. Rowan grinned. I score goals. Hudson felt something shift inside him. He had spent 2 years building walls, protecting his small family from more loss. But standing here, watching Avery laugh softly at Rowan's confidence, he felt those walls loosen slightly. He did not see her as the woman crying in the rain anymore. He saw someone patient, someone steady, someone who did not look at his chaos and step back. When they stepped outside the store, the sky was clear. Sunlight touched the pavement where rain had fallen the day before. Avery adjusted the grocery bag in her hand. It was nice seeing you again, she said gently, preparing to step away before the moment grew too meaningful. Hudson nodded. You too. Bennett hugged Avery quickly around the waist. Callum gave a small but serious wave. Rowan looked thoughtful. Just as Avery turned to leave, Callum stepped forward with quiet confidence. Can you come watch our soccer practice on Saturday? She asked plainly. We like when people stay and watch. The question hung in the warm air. Hudson looked at Avery, surprised but not stopping his daughter this time. Avery felt her heart pause between fear and hope. Standing there with sunlight on her face and 3 expectant pairs of eyes on her, Avery realized that saying yes might change more than just her weekend. Avery stood in the grocery store parking lot long after the Reed family had driven away, holding her bag of milk and bread, asking herself one simple question. Was she allowed to say yes? It sounded small. A soccer practice on a Saturday morning. But to her it felt bigger than it should. She had just lost custody of her daughter. Was it right to stand on the sidelines and cheer for someone else's children? Would it hurt too much? Would it look strange? The old fear returned quickly. What if people judged her again? What if they asked questions she was not ready to answer? What if being around children reopened a wound she was barely holding together? But then she remembered the way Callum had asked the question, calm and hopeful. We like when people stay and watch. It was not about romance. It was not about replacing anyone. It was about staying. Avery had spent years staying when others left. She stayed when bills grew larger than her paycheck. She stayed when her ex-husband moved out and stopped calling as often. She stayed when her daughter cried at night asking why things were changing. Staying was not a weakness. It was her strength. By Friday evening, her decision felt clear. Saturday morning arrived bright and cool. The soccer field buzzed with energy, children running in different directions, parents setting up folding chairs, coaches calling out instructions. Avery parked her car at the far end of the lot, her hands resting on the steering wheel for a moment before she stepped out. She almost turned back, but then she saw three familiar heads of hair bouncing across the grass. "Rain Lady," Rowan shouted the second she spotted her. Several parents turned at the nickname, curious. Avery felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept walking forward. Bennett and Callum ran toward her, their excitement pure and unfiltered. "You came," Bennett said, breathless with happiness. "I said I would try," Avery replied gently. Hudson approached at a slower pace, holding a water bottle in one hand. He looked surprised, but not uncomfortable. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually show up," he admitted quietly. "Neither was I," she said honestly. There were curious glances from other parents sitting on the bleachers. Avery felt them, the same silent questions she had felt at the courthouse. Who is she? Why is she here? But this time she did not let those looks push her away. She chose a seat near the front, where she could see clearly. When the game started, she watched carefully. At first, she clapped softly, then louder. When Rowan kicked the ball in the right direction, Avery stood halfway up from her seat without thinking. "That's it, Rowan. Keep going," she called out. Hudson noticed the way his daughters' faces changed when they heard her voice. They stood taller. They ran faster. They kept looking toward the bleachers, making sure she was still there. Callum made a careful pass to Bennett, and Avery cheered like it was a championship game. She did not hold back. She did not stay quiet. She let herself be present. Other parents slowly relaxed. A few even smiled at her enthusiasm. One mother beside her laughed and said, "We need more energy like that out here." Avery smiled back politely, surprised that kindness could exist in small places like this. On the field, the triplets seemed calmer than usual. Hudson noticed it immediately. They were not fighting over the ball. They were not looking anxious. They were steady, focused. Every time they glanced at the sidelines and saw Avery watching, their expressions softened. Hudson sat down beside her halfway through practice. For a moment they watched in comfortable silence. "They like you," he said finally. "I like them," she answered. He studied her profile carefully. She did not look broken today. She looked alive. The sun caught the side of her face, and for the first time since the courthouse, he saw something other than sadness. "You don't seem uncomfortable," he added. "I was," she admitted. "I wasn't sure I had the right to be here." Hudson shook his head slightly. "You showed up. That's more than most people do." Practice ended with tired laughter and grass-stained socks. The girls ran toward Avery before even reaching their father. Rowan wrapped her arms around her waist again without hesitation. "You saw my goal," she said proudly. "I did," Avery replied. "Next time it'll go in." Callum wiped sweat from her forehead. "You cheered the loudest," she observed. Bennett looked up at her seriously. "You stayed the whole time." Avery felt her throat tighten again, but this time it was not from sadness. It was from something warm and steady growing inside her. Hudson walked over, holding 3 juice boxes. "Thank you for coming," he said sincerely. "It meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to me too," she replied. The air felt different now, not awkward, not uncertain, just honest. As they began gathering their things, Callum tugged gently at Avery's sleeve again. "Will you come back next week?" she asked plainly. Hudson did not interrupt this time. He simply stood there, watching Avery's face carefully, waiting for her answer. With 3 hopeful faces looking up at her, and Hudson quietly holding his breath, Avery realized this was no longer just about soccer. Just as Avery started feeling needed again, a letter arrived that made her hands shake. It was from her lawyer. Her ex-husband had filed a motion to restrict her visitation completely. The words blurred as she read them at her kitchen table. The claim said, instability, emotional uncertainty, disruption. It painted her as a risk instead of a mother who was trying. Her fragile progress, the small light that had begun to grow inside her, flickered dangerously. For a moment she could not breathe. She had worked so hard to stay steady. She had shown up for soccer practice. She smiled more. She had started believing that maybe she was not broken beyond repair. And now this. Hope felt dangerous again. She sat back in her chair and stared at the wall. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe she should stop stepping into new spaces. Maybe getting close to Hudson and the girls would only make everything worse. If her ex-husband believed she was unstable, Would being around another family give him more reason to fight harder? The old instinct returned, the instinct to disappear before causing damage. Across town, Hudson was helping the girls finish homework when his phone buzzed. It was a short message from Avery. I might not make it Saturday. Things are complicated right now. He read it twice. Is Rain Lady coming this weekend? Rowan asked without looking up from her crayons. Hudson hesitated. I'm not sure. Callum looked up immediately. Something is wrong, she said in her usual calm voice. Bennett frowned. She sounded happy last time. Children sensed shifts before adults admitted them. Hudson felt it too. He remembered how quickly people had stepped away after his wife died, how easily connections could fade when life became complicated. He did not want that pattern again. That evening, Avery met her lawyer in a small office that smelled like old paper and coffee. The explanation was clear. Her ex-husband believed that limiting visitation would create stability for T. Heir daughter. He was using her recent financial struggle as proof. It's not personal, the lawyer said carefully, but it felt personal. It always did. When Avery stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt smaller than she had at the courthouse weeks ago. At least that day had been final. This felt like something being taken again before she could rebuild. Her phone buzzed. It was Hudson. Can we talk? He had written. She almost ignored it. She did not want to drag him into her mess. But something inside her was tired of carrying everything alone. They met at a quiet park bench near the soccer field. The girls were at a neighbor's house for the evening. Hudson sat beside her, not too close, not too far. She explained everything slowly, the motion, the fear, the possibility of losing even supervised visits. I think I should step back, she finished quietly. From you, from the girls. I don't want to create more problems. Hudson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took a steady breath. Do you think caring about people is a problem? He asked gently. No, she whispered. But what if it makes things harder for my daughter? He nodded thoughtfully. When my wife died, people told me to simplify my life, to avoid new attachments, to focus only on survival. And for a while I did. But survival is not the same as living. She looked at him, surprised by the firmness in his tone. You didn't choose this fight, he continued, but you're still showing up. That matters. The next week, when the court date arrived, Avery expected to walk in alone again. She wore a simple navy dress and held her folder tightly against her chest. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. When she stepped into the courthouse hallway, she stopped. Hudson was there. Not just him. Bennett, Callum, and Rowan stood beside him, holding small handmade drawings. The girls waved when they saw her. We're here to stay, Rowan said proudly. Other people in the hallway glanced over. Curious, Hudson stepped forward calmly. You don't have to face this alone, he said. The words hit deeper than anything else. Inside the courtroom, Hudson did not speak unless asked. He did not interfere, but he sat where Avery could see him. The girls sat quietly with a family friend outside, waiting. The presence alone changed something inside her. For the first time, the room did not feel cold. The judge reviewed documents, lawyers spoke, arguments were made. But Avery stood straighter than before. Not because the situation was easier, but because she was not alone. When they stepped back into the hallway after the session ended, no final decision had been made yet. It would take time. More reviews, more patience, but Hudson was still there. Avery looked at him, tears in her eyes, but not from defeat. You stayed, she said softly. He nodded once. I don't leave when things get hard. The girls ran toward her, wrapping her in careful hugs. At that moment, Avery understood something powerful. Hope-driven emotional redemption was not about winning instantly. It was about standing firm even when the past tried to pull you backward. And this time, she was not standing alone. As the judge called her name once more for a final statement, Avery walked forward, and Hudson walked with her. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the new documents placed carefully on her desk. But this time, the evidence was not only numbers and forms, it was proof that Avery Callahan was no longer standing alone. The courtroom felt different from the first day. Avery still felt nervous, but her hands were steady. She had spent the last few months rebuilding her life piece by piece. She had secured a second job with consistent hours. She had moved into a slightly larger apartment, closer to her daughter's school. She had attended every scheduled visitation on time. Stability was no longer just a promise. It was visible. But what truly changed the room was not her financial report. It was the people sitting behind her. Hudson had agreed to testify, not as a hero, not as a savior, but as someone who had watched her show up again and again. When his name was called, he walked to the stand calmly. He spoke clearly, without exaggeration. "I have seen Avery choose to stay," he said, "not because it was easy, because it mattered." He explained how she had volunteered at soccer practice even before the custody issue improved, how she showed patience, how she listened carefully to children's worries, how she never missed a Saturday once she committed. He did not speak about romance. He spoke about character. "She doesn't seek attention," he continued. "She offers presence." The courtroom was quiet. Then the judge reviewed something unexpected. 3 handwritten letters. Bennett's letter said that Avery cheered louder than anyone and made her feel brave even when she missed a goal. Callum wrote that Avery listens fully and never interrupts when someone is explaining something important. Rowan's letter simply said, "She doesn't leave when you feel heavy." The judge read them slowly. They were simple words written in uneven handwriting, but they carried weight no legal document could measure. Avery felt tears gather in her eyes, but she did not cry loudly. She had learned that redemption did not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked quiet and steady. After reviewing the updated financial records and hearing testimony, the judge spoke carefully. Avery's visitation rights would be expanded immediately. Weekend stays would resume. If progress continued, partial custody restoration would follow within months. It was not a perfect victory. It was something stronger. It was hope confirmed. Outside the courthouse, Avery bent down to hug her daughter, who had been waiting with Hudson and the girls. This time, when children laughed in the hallway, the sound did not hurt. It felt possible again. Hudson stood beside her but did not step ahead. He did not propose. He did not make grand promises. Instead, he looked at her with calm certainty. "We can take this slowly," he said. "No pressure. Just partnership." The word felt right. Not rescue. Not a replacement. Partnership. In the weeks that followed, life did not suddenly become perfect. There were still bills. There were still schedules to manage. There were still moments of doubt. But something had shifted deeply. Avery no longer felt like a woman who had been left behind. She felt chosen. The triplets began including her naturally in small routines. Bennett saved her a seat at games. Callum asked her opinion on school projects. Rowan held her hand without asking permission. None of it felt forced. Hudson noticed how calm his daughter seemed when Avery was around. Not dependent. Just secure. It was the same calm they had when he read them bedtime stories. The kind that comes from knowing someone will stay. Kindness had done what status never could. Money had mattered in court, yes. But kindness had rebuilt her confidence. The community had strengthened her case. Presence had rewritten her story. Months later, on a warm afternoon, Hudson hosted a small backyard birthday party for the triplets. Balloons floated gently near the fence. A homemade cake sat on a wooden table. Avery stood near the grill, laughing softly as she helped pass out plates. Her daughter stood beside her, comfortable and happy, holding Rowan's hand like they had known each other forever. Neighbors chatted. Music played quietly. Nothing looked dramatic. Nothing looked extraordinary. But to Avery, it felt like a miracle. She stepped back for a moment and looked at the scene in front of her. Children running in circles. Hudson adjusting decorations. Her daughter is smiling freely. No one questioned her presence. No one measures her worth by income or mistakes. She had not replaced anyone. Hudson's late wife was still honored in quiet ways. Pictures remained in the hallway. Stories were still told. Avery never tried to erase that love. Instead, she had and chosen to add to it. Bennett noticed her standing still and pointed. "She's thinking again," she told her sisters. All 3 girls suddenly ran toward her across the grass, just like the first day in the rain. But this time, Avery did not freeze. She did not question whether she belonged. She did not wonder if she was allowed. She knelt down on the grass and opened her arms wide. The triplets collided into her with laughter, and her daughter joined the hug without hesitation. Hudson watched from a few steps away, a quiet smile on his face. Avery held them close, feeling something steady and certain filled the space where loneliness once lived. She had not been given this family by blood. She had been chosen by staying. As the children laughed in her embrace and sunlight warmed the backyard, Avery understood that sometimes the greatest families are not the ones you are born into, but the ones who decide not to leave. If this story touched something in your heart, don't just scroll away from it. Stories like this grow stronger when more people see them, so share it with someone who believes in staying when things get hard. And if you want more stories about chosen families and second chances, make sure you stay connected here. But before you go, tell me this. If someone walked into your life on your hardest day, would you have the courage to stay for them? Or would you walk away?